increase in the human interactions that went along with the severe red tide. So when we saw the red tide mounting in 2018, I know it was earlier down where you are, but it came into our waters in the summer of 2018, we began to be concerned about what might happen this next time around, and wanting to try to deflect the possibility there might be more human interactions that led to ingestion of fishing gear. We went into the community and started doing a lot of outreach, letting people know what happened before. One of the things we learned during this more recent red tide is that not all red tides are created equal. This one burned hotter, but didn't last as long. It had extremely high cell counts that were in there. And those high cell counts actually led to brevetoxin-caused deaths of at least 4 of our dolphins, with many others that went missing, but 4 could be confirmed from tissue analyses. The red tide didn't just come in from the west and hit the bay all at once. It moved up the bay from the south and served as kind of a piston, and in some cases pushed fish out of the area to the north because we were at the northern edge of it, or in other cases pinned them up against the shoreline and led to mortalities of fish, such that we had more than 88% of the dolphin prey fish that were lost from this red tide. We wondered from the previous red tide whether or not these dolphins were compensating in some way, finding something else to eat since they weren't leaving the area. And analyses of stable isotopes, which is a technique that can tell us something about what the dolphins are eating, suggested they were eating fish that were lower on the food chain. So they were compensating by eating these scaled sardines and menhaden, filter feeding fish that actually do better during red tides than they do during non-red tide periods. The red tide ended in the January of 2019, and the prey fish bounced back pretty quickly. We didn't see any of the fishing gear ingestion cases in Sarasota during this red tide, but we did see entanglements by calves as their mothers were pushed into the areas, finding the same fish the anglers were interested in. The calves presumably blundered into the fishing gear. But we found another ecological impact, and that was a record number of shark bites on these dolphins, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. We implemented a new way of looking at red tide and other aspects of the ecosystem by putting in these remote sensing underwater hearing systems, these sensory systems that were spaced around the bay and allow us to keep a track remotely of what's going on. And the way this works is that it records the sounds that occur at a station. This is at one station up here at the mouth of Palmasola Bay. Time along this axis, frequency along this axis. And anytime you see purple, light purple, it's an indication of sound energy. So prior to the red tide coming through, lots of sound energy, whether it's fish forming this carpet of sound at the bottom, snapping shrimp making a lot of the vertical sounds, dolphin echolocation clicks in the background. This is a happy, healthy ecosystem before the red tide. This is the same site 1 month later. No happy, healthy ecosystem. There's one very lonely toadfish that keeps croaking in the background. But long after the fish are off, the carcasses are off the beach, long after the dead fish have stopped floating on the bay, there is still impact from the red tide. This is what the ecosystem is like following the visible signs of a red tide. But in looking at the ecosystem impacts that were different, we noted that there's an inverse relationship between the presence of stingrays or the absence of stingrays and an increase in shark attacks on dolphins. Jane Gardner at New College of Florida was monitoring sharks and rays in Sarasota Bay, and she noted that when the red tide peaked in the summer of 2018, the sharks and the rays disappeared. The sharks eventually came back the next spring, but it was a long time before rays started occurring, and she saw thousands of dead rays up in the northern part of Sarasota Bay. With our own fishing, what we've noted is that when we see an increase in the numbers of rays, we see a decrease in the number of shark bites. So each of these green boxes are times when ray numbers are good and shark bites are down. The orange boxes show cases where the ray numbers are down and the shark bite numbers are increasing. So what we suspect is that as the sharks lose their primary prey source, which are rays, they go out looking for other things. And dolphins are a potential prey item, and baby dolphins, young of the year dolphins, are bite-sized morsels that don't get a chance to heal from a scar. They actually are lost to the sharks as consumed prey. And then there are other things that we hadn't planned on. There was, presumably you all have heard about the Piney Point discharge from a decommissioned phosphate plant up in Tampa Bay that occurred at the end of March and early April. We've been monitoring this situation up there, and we're not yet sure what the impacts are going to be. We've been doing dolphin surveys through the resident community of dolphins that inhabits the waters in southeastern Tampa Bay, from the edge of the Sarasota dolphin community here on up to about Apollo Beach. And so far, what we're finding is that, unlike the surveys we did back in the 80s and 90s that showed a fairly even distribution of dolphins through these waters, we're seeing very few dolphins in the vicinity of and more towards the periphery of this. We're going to be continuing these studies over time. So far, we haven't seen any dolphins that have acute health issues in terms of respiratory issues or skin lesions, fortunately, but the distributional changes as a result of changes in the ecosystem could be an issue for these animals. So the dolphins face a lot of threats up and down the coast, not just in Sarasota Bay, but also down through Charlotte Harbor and elsewhere. And we try to engage in mitigation measures. We use outreach, education, science. We go out into the public and try to inform them of what the dolphins need in order to be able to continue to thrive in their areas. And we also engage in rescuing the animals one individual at a time. While most conservation programs look at population levels rescue efforts, we've been able to understand that saving one dolphin at a time can add up. It can leverage these population level benefits. We've done the modeling to show that each dolphin saved can yield even more individuals over time and add to that population, which makes it a good tool for areas like the northern Gulf of Mexico, where populations have been depleted by the oil spill. One particularly vivid example of this is this photograph that we got of 4 mother-calf pairs in Sarasota. 3 of the mothers in this photograph had benefited from human interventions, from rescues. And without those interventions, those 3 mothers and their 3 calves wouldn't be in this photograph. So there's definite benefit to going out and trying to rescue the individuals. And the National Marine Fisheries Service, NOAA, asks us to do this quite frequently. As part of our outreach efforts, we engage in a variety of things, including lectures and talking to folks, a lot of Zoom presentations now. And we developed a PSA, and I'm hoping you can hear this. Please nod if you can.
For me, it started with one hit of sardines. Oh, good. Sardines. That's where I learned to bag. It was easy to score free fish. I mean, hey, with this dolphin smile, yeah, it's illegal. No one cares. I had a monkey on my back. Man, I was showing some people food, hanging out on their boats, dodging props and hooks, and doing dangerous stuff that I'm ashamed to admit. Look, I know that I can kick this if people would just stop feeding me.
And it's such a temptation to feed dolphins, and it's a problem that's particularly an issue down in the Charlotte Harbor area. There's probably more dolphin feeding that goes on down there than any other part of the state other than Panama City that I'm aware of. So we need to encourage folks to do right by the dolphins and let them stay wild. So in addition to going out and doing the direct interventions and the outreach, we also engage in training. We try to bring along the next generation of conservation scientists through conservation capacity building. And in this way, we've had more than 400 interns that have worked with us and learned what we do, and a number of trainees from other countries that come to work with us. And we have grad students. Many professors refer to their academic tree. In Sarasota, we talk about our academic kelp since we are fairly wet. And here you can see an indication. Each branch is a different school. Each leaf is a different student that's come through our program and gotten some level of training or guidance from us over time. But we consider this to be one of the most important things that we do. Sharing our data in such a way that the dolphins in Sarasota Bay can be a reference population for comparison with other places is also an extremely important thing. And when the Deepwater Horizon oil spill occurred off the coast of Louisiana back in 2010, NOAA came to us to serve as a reference population for comparisons and to help them in health assessments for comparisons in the waters of Louisiana and Mississippi Sound. In doing these same kinds of health assessments that we do in Sarasota, we're able to make a number of comparisons that were very informative. First of all, the Barataria dolphins didn't leave Barataria Bay during the oil spill. This is during the oil spill in Barataria Bay. The dolphins that were exposed to the oil and associated contaminants in Barataria Bay were 5 times more likely to have moderate to severe lung disease as compared to the Sarasota dolphins. The disease conditions in the Barataria dolphins were significantly greater in prevalence and severity than those in Sarasota, and they were consistent with oil toxicity and exposure. And finally, the low reproductive success that they observed. Only 20% of their diagnosed pregnancies were successful compared to the 83% we have in Sarasota. And the low year-to-year survival that they've seen, only 87% versus the 96% that we have, were strong indications that the impacts from the Deepwater Horizon are unsustainable. This population is in trouble. The estimates are that without any other impacts, it's going to take more than 30 years for the population to come back. And that's even if the state of Louisiana doesn't destroy the habitat they're in with their diversion projects. So being able to use these data for comparison helped to bring BP to the settlement table as opposed to going through the entire court process, and got the funds out there more quickly to be able to use towards restoration. So with that, I'm going to open things up to question if I have any time left for questions, but I do appreciate you letting me talk to you about the dolphins that live in our common neighborhoods. And I do want to make sure that I thank our local sponsors, the Barancic Foundation up in Sarasota, Mote Scientific Foundation, which has been quite active down on Pine Island, as well as up in Sarasota. Elizabeth Moore Fund and the Rick and Nancy Moskowitz Fund. And so with that, I'm just sharing and be available for questions.
Well, thank you. This was a wonderful presentation, Randy. It went by really fast, but I felt like I learned a lot more about dolphins, and I thought I knew something about our dolphins here. Anybody have questions and comments? Just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. And if you're having trouble unmuting yourself, wave your hand so I know that you're trying to do that.
Nadine knows all the hard questions, so she's not allowed.
Okay, Mike has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, a quick question about the Deepwater Horizon. I know that occurred in 2010. They said that the oil had basically disappeared. Have you heard any more about that?
The oil has not disappeared.
Right.
When we go up there and do ongoing health assessments, which we didn't get to do last year because of COVID, but as late as I think 2018 was the last one that we did. You still can stir up oil slicks when you're walking around in Barataria Bay.
Okay.
The pollution is not gone completely. Certainly a lot of it is gone, but there's still some there. And what we're seeing are chronic health issues with the dolphins that are there, and differences. Those dolphins that were born after the oil spill are much more like Sarasota dolphins in terms of their health parameters than those that were alive at the time that the oil spill occurred.
Wow.
Thank you.
So Randy, I do have a question. So if I'm out in my boat and I see dolphins, how should I best view them without causing any interference or any interaction with them?
Great question. The guidelines from the National Marine Fisheries Service, which is the federal agency that protects these animals, are that you should stay 50 yards away from the dolphins. You shouldn't approach them any closer than 50 yards. That doesn't mean they won't approach you, but the best thing is to just observe them from a distance. Don't turn towards them, don't move through their groups, don't interfere with what they're doing, but just enjoy the view from the distance and get a sense of how they go about making their living.
Okay, there's a couple questions in the chat. One is, Randy mentioned that a few dolphins make it to old age around here, only to their 40s. Why is that? And the second question is, what should we do if we see injured dolphins or a dolphin tangled up?
Both of those are really good questions. The situation with the old age in the dolphins is analogous to what we see for humans. There aren't that many humans that make it to 110, which would be the equivalent of a dolphin at 67 years of age, probably. Mm-hmm. So I think it's not that different from what we see in many mammals, whereas there will be some exceptional lives in terms of lifespan and others that are more common. That'll be less. Certainly the human activities shorten the lifespan of many animals. Those that have been injured as a result of interacting with humans have a higher probability of being injured again down the road and having a shorter lifespan. We've been able to do that modeling. And we also know that there are mothers out there who are teaching their young to interact with humans because they've done it. And they learn through observation, and those individuals have a very low probability of success over time as well. Yeah. If you see a sick or injured, if you see a dolphin that looks like it requires help, then Nadine just put it down there, call FWC. And they have a lab in Port Charlotte that has qualified people, trained people that can come and investigate the situation and determine what the next best course of action might be.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions?
Do I work with any other marine mammals? Over the course of my lifetime, yes, I've worked with a variety of animals. Our program right now focuses on dolphins, but we work with dolphins of other species. We work in Argentina and Brazil with something called the Franciscana dolphin, a little bitty dolphin that lives in coastal waters down there and is heavily impacted by artisanal fishing activities. We're also working with colleagues in Cambodia on the Mekong River dolphin. So what's left of a population of dolphins that inhabits the upper reaches of the Mekong River before you get to the waterfalls in Laos. So in Cambodia, trying to understand how we can help that population to survive in the face of illegal fishing activities that are killing them off and other things that are threatening them. So we engage in a variety of species. I've worked on large whales. We've worked on manatees before. But right now our primary focus is on dolphins.
Claudia has her hand up. Go ahead, Claudia.
I have a question about manatees. We have a local person here that insists to interact with the manatees here. And he was arrested, but has told people now that it is not illegal for humans to interact with manatees. I'm really concerned about that. Is that really true, that there is no law against humans interacting with manatees?
No, that's not true.
There is a law.
There is a law, and the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, FWC, should be contacted if you see people interacting with manatees.
Oh, he's got videos posted of him doing it.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm not in enforcement, but they would be the ones that should be responding to that.
Thank you.
So here are a couple more in the chat. When fishing, I sometimes see dolphins come close to the boat. How do you get them away from the boat?
Isn't that a good question? The best I can offer for that is reel in for a period of time and just watch them. Enjoy the view, and eventually they'll go away. You're not allowed to interfere with their behavior. That's considered harassment under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and that is illegal. So enjoy the view or move someplace else and start fishing again. But continuing to fish while they're there, leaving your line in the water is asking for problems. Releasing your catch when they're around is just reinforcing them approaching you or somebody else the next time and taking their bait, their catch, or their discards. And so the best thing is just don't give them the temptation. Set them up for success, reel in, watch them, or go someplace else.
Mm-hmm. And someone asks, how can we get involved with any of the research programs or support it?
Well, we are based up in Sarasota. We have the ability to put you on our list for receiving e-newsletters and social media content and our annual reports. And Nadine can provide you with that information since she actually prepares it. But she can take care of that. Prior to COVID, we did have a team of local volunteers that would help us. We've not been able to use that team of volunteers since COVID came about due to the regulations that our home institution has in place for who we can interact with as staff members. And I'm not sure when we're going to be able to start that up again. So right now it's more one-sided where we can share information with you, and we're happy to do that. And then hope that you're going to share the information with others and make people more aware of our neighbors that are out there and what they need to be able to continue to thrive in our local waters.
Okay, so if anybody has further questions about getting involved or any of these things, you can send those questions to info@gpica.org, and then it'll come to Nadine and me, and then we can send it off to the appropriate person. If you didn't catch, for example, where you could potentially get your name on a list to eventually volunteer or whatever. So, so thanks again.
No, you're quite
Dr.
welcome.
Wells, we're delighted that you were able to come today.
It was a pleasure, and I'm glad that there are others out there who enjoy the environment around here as much as I do.
No, we certainly do.
All right.
Okay. So now we're on to our last item of business, a large item of business, a public hearing. For this public hearing, Veronica Martin, who is the senior planner with TDM Consulting, and Tom Odom of Mitigation Resources, and they will speak about the request of the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast for a rezoning and special exemption application that they are submitting to Lee County to allow a boardwalk, a kayak launch, and a parking lot on a property across from the Flamingo Bay development and next door to the newest 2020 reserve over in St. James City side. The project is called Pine Island Preserve at Matlacha Pass. We know this project is controversial, and we know you'll have a lot of questions. So I want to make sure we all listen carefully and respectfully to the presenters without interruption, and that the questions we ask at the end of their talk are informational rather than confrontational. If a question occurs to you while they're speaking, you might want to put it in the chat, and just like you did with the dolphin presentation, and we'll be sure that it gets answered. You can also just raise your hand during the Q&A at the end of the talk, and if I see you, and I don't see about half of you, your pictures, but if you can, get your picture up there, put your hand up. If I see that, I'll call on you. The GPICA and the residents of Greater Pine Island have no formal authority over whether or not this project goes through. No formal authority, but we can register our objections and questions if we have them. And we can provide a sense of how the people at this meeting feel about the project. We will do this by means of an anonymous poll, and this is a feature of Zoom that I will be using for the first time, but it's pretty straightforward. At the end of the Q&A, I will launch a poll. That is, I will send around a question that will appear on the screen of all of you who are present by computer or tablet. The results, it'll be anonymous, so your name will not appear in the results, and it will be a yes or no question. So the results will immediately be shown as percentages for and against. I'm keeping this poll anonymous because of the controversial nature of the project, but I urge you to keep an open mind during their presentation and listen carefully to the speakers' answers to our questions before you respond to the poll. Okay, is there any question right now about how this will proceed? Okay, so who is going to start here? So Tom, you're presenting along with Veronica, right? Somehow I don't see her name.
That's correct.
Okay, we got quite a feedback there.
Yeah, I had to use my phone.
Oh, it's got a very big echo.
Is that better?
Oh, can you shut the audio off on your computer or your phone, one or the other? I think it's picking up both.
Yeah, I couldn't hear the presentation, so I had to go to my phone to actually get audio, but now I hear you okay.
Okay.
That's why it was doing that, so I turned it off my phone.
Okay, and we have also Veronica Martin. Veronica, can you hear us? Can you hear me? I don't hear from Veronica.
And she was having the same problem
Okay.
as me, although we're not
You're not
in the same place.
Yeah.
It looks like she's still on the Zoom, but she's not.
She's not hearing us, so.
Yeah, she's not muted. So I'll send her an email.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, I see her down there.
Yeah, I see her, but She's not jumping in, so I'm assuming she can't respond.
So Tom, can you begin?
Sure, I will.
you have- I'm sorry, I do have the two documents that Veronica wanted me to screen share at appropriate moments. So just tell me if you want me to put up a document and I'll try to do that.
Okay, Helen, let me first start off by, I imagine some of you, hopefully many of you, have been down to the Galt Preserve on the southern end of the island.
Sure.
We designed that project, and this project is very similar to that one. There's no electricity, there's no water. It's passive recreation. So cars can get to the central area of parking. There's a lot of trails they have out there that are on existing fire breaks and that were there when they bought the property. The Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast. There's a marsh that was in the middle part of the property that we basically restored the hydrology to. And then there's a very long boardwalk that goes out to the harbor, the estuary. But then there's other design elements that are part of the plan that there's a pond up to the north that was a cattle pond. We're going to make a littoral slope and create better water quality there. And there'll be like a composting toilet or a porta potty. It'll be a little bit different than the Clivus that's at Galt Preserve, because you can't buy those anymore in the state of Florida. So it'll be more like a porta potty, fancy porta potty. But the idea is to get people there to, for instance, the stormwater ponds will be pretty much the same as Galt Preserve. They're going to be habitat developed. They're not going to be just a perfect square. They're going to have low areas where the prey will concentrate for the wading birds and some of the same aspects that you've seen out at Galt Preserve. So I hope that can put in perspective those of you who've been down to Galt Preserve. For instance, the gate is going to be solar. It's going to work off of solar energy, and it's a very passive park. So just so you can put it in perspective, it's essentially.
Tom, I want to stop you 1 second. People have been asking for a map, and I think I might have a map that Veronica passed to me. Can I try to put that up?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Let's see.
Okay, so I've got an area location. Yeah, map. Can you see that?
Yep, there it is.
Okay. So here's Stringfellow Road. Over here is Mount Lachey Pass. This is the site, and then we have 2020 property, I believe, over here. Is that right, Tom?
Yes, I think they're coordinating the hiking trails so that they'll be interactive between both sites.
Oh, okay, so the hiking trails will go through. Over here, we have the Flamingo Bay development, so we all know where this is. Okay, go ahead, Tom.
So that's what I was trying to explain. If you've been to Galt Preserve, then you have the flavor of what this site would do.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically the same element. So again, there'll be no lighting, there's no electricity, there's no water, there's no sewer. It's basically, when you come there, you better bring some water to drink, and especially if you're going to do some hiking. And I wonder how many of you have been out to Galt Preserve yet to take a walk around.
Many times.
Yeah, this is a sister site, so to speak. It's not a Lee County site. We designed it for Lee County Parks and Rec as part of their 2020 conservation program. The same elements, just a little bit different. The boardwalk's not as long as it is at Galt, but Galt has a boardwalk across a wetland that we basically recreated and designed from a low area out there. But so that's essentially what it is, without boring you with all the engineering details. But it's designed to treat the stormwater from the runoff from the parking lot and the roads the road that comes in and out of the site. So all of that water is treated, and it basically gets treated as it goes through into the ground by state standards. There's a state and a federal permit that mitigate for any impacts on the site. I believe that's already been taken care of. So in a nutshell, that's the plan.
Okay, there's a question in the chat here. It says, where is the road, the parking lot, the kayak launch, and the boardwalk? Veronica asks if I can please show the other exhibit. I think I may have downloaded the same one twice, but before I show the other exhibit, I'm going to go back to that same map. And if Tom could sort of tell me.
Helen, I'm sorry for interrupting. Can I put up the plans and then we can,
Okay.
you can look at it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm going to share my
Yeah.
screen.
Good.
There it is. Let's see. Okay, let me know if you can see that.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so basically, if you look at the picture that you showed, the aerial, here is the site itself. So all of this area out here are where the saltern flats and the mangroves are. Here's the existing hiking trails. You can see that they're pretty linear because they basically are the roads that were out there, fire lines that were out there when the property was purchased. There's really nothing new built except for, I think, maybe right here, because the boardwalk, can you see where my hand is? Can you see my cursor? Okay, thank you. So from that point, the straight lines out here go out to the kayak launch. This is the little wetland that we enhanced because it had a drainage ditch that came out of it. So we're trying to keep more water in. Here's the existing cattle pond that we're going to build a littoral shelf, a shallow area that helps the wading birds and water quality. And so out of this whole site, here's the area that is shown more in detail over here, that there's an entrance road. The stormwater pond is this little parallel area right over here, or the stormwater ditch. And it goes into this pond, which all these little squiggles are different elevations. Those are the deeper holes, the smaller circles. And that's so when during the dry season, the water starts to recede and gathers in these little pools, the wading birds, like they do at Galt, they love to go use that. There's 2 pavilions, just like Galt Preserve. I think it's exactly the same structural design. I'm not a structural engineer, but we use the same designs there. There's an ADA pathway that goes around the pond and up to the restroom. And then there's a parking lot here for people to come in and park. And from that point, it's quite a long ways. You see where this is, it's a long way out to get to the boardwalk, a long way out the boardwalk to get to the kayak launch here. So you have to be pretty robust to get your kayak and wheel it all the way down to the end. But the idea was to put as much of these amenities closer to the open area and Stringfellow Road. And these are just design details of stormwater ponds. That's the solar gate that opens and closes based on solar energy. This is a little bit closer view of where the pavilions would be and the ADA ability to go around the ponds, and of course the restroom.
Someone
Yes.
has asked how many cars is the parking lot for? I see 48 spaces written on here, plus 2 ADA accessible spaces, and then bus parking and kayak canoe drop-off area. Could you explain about the drop-off area and how the kayaks and canoes will get across down that very long boardwalk to the water?
Yeah, they're going to have to go down a dirt path, if you can see my hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the 48 spaces is, and I'm almost positive the 48 spaces are by Lee County design, depending on the area. I can't remember what the calculation was. And then the two handicap places, but they're going to have to go down this dirt path. Let me go back a little bit. Here's where the dirt path was that you saw. They'll have to walk all the way down here to get to the boardwalk, and then go down the boardwalk out to where the kayak launch is. And here, that's where it starts. This area here is what we call a saltern. You have a lot of that on Pine Island, but it goes across the saltern into some of the mangrove areas here and out to the boardwalk.
You know how far that is? It's like a mile or half a mile or?
It's closer to, yeah, it's closer to a half a mile.
So you really do expect people to be able to walk their boats all the way down half a mile?
There may be some people that are inclined to do that. You know, I'm not a marine expert. I thought that most people would bring their boat to there, maybe walk in. There's going to be some, you see these little, let me get back to this and show you rather than being terribly bored, but
How wide?
there's going to be some
Okay, wait a second,
there'll
Mike.
be some observation decks. There'll be some observation decks along the way. One of them is right here where there's a little opening. Those are those little stub outs that you see. So there'll be places to stop and look as you're going back and forth.
Okay.
What was the question?
How wide are the boardwalks?
Let's see. About 6 feet.
6 feet. So if you're carrying two boaters passing each other would barely fit, right? Almost.
Yeah, you could probably pull over at one of those observation areas
Okay.
and let the other person go by, you know,
Yeah.
So another question is the mangroves that are back in there where presumably the boardwalk would have to be put.
yes.
On Pine Island and Greater Pine Island, it's illegal to cut down mangroves. So I'm wondering how you propose to construct a boardwalk without cutting down mangroves.
It's the mangroves will have to be trimmed and they build over the trim part. They're basically cut, and the mitigation is already, as far as I can remember, the mitigation has already been approved and purchased by the Gulf Coast Foundation.
How short are they cutting them?
Oh, I imagine they cut them down to like 2 feet or so. Again, I'm not an expert in you know, the marine aspects, but I worked through the permitting, and it's been permitted by the Water Management District and the Corps of Engineers. And I think they bought some credits from the Little Pine Island Mitigation Bank to compensate for the impacts. Okay,
here's another question in the chat. Why do you need so much parking if few kayakers will be using the launch? And a related question, have you considered impervious drive to minimize the volume of stormwater retention needed?
Yeah, the answer to those two questions are, there are a lot of people that use Galt Preserve, and this is basically going to be for the people that access it from Stringfellow. The people that go to the kayak launch are going to be a lot fewer than the people that want to come and you know, visit, go to the pavilion, walk some of the trails, do that kind of work. There is it's essentially the same computation for stormwater, pervious or semi-impervious versus asphalt. It's essentially the same thing. What we did do was add a vegetative planting area in the middle of the parking lot to gather some of that stormwater and keep it there itself. It's, again, it's just like Galt Preserve. For those who've been out there, when you go down the main road, you can hardly tell that there's a retention area along the side because it's planted, and it's not very deep at all.
Okay, another question in the chat. Why do you need 2 entrances?
Actually, there's not 2 entrances. There's one entrance, and there's the ability to, if there was an event that some of the traffic that's leaving so that everybody's not coming and going at the same place, you can open the temporary gate
Oh, I see.
and have people leaving out to the north so that everybody's not on top of themselves trying to turn in and turn out, just, when something like that might occur.
Okay.
So it's a one-way exit road.
So here's another question. What will happen if an eagle builds a nest along the boardwalk? I presume in a tree right next to the boardwalk. Galt currently closes the path from October to May for nesting.
I don't think that there's any trees desirable enough along the boardwalk. It's for bald eagles. Again, I'm not a bald eagle expert, but generally they like tall pine trees, larger trees. And we're talking about shorter mangroves and salterns that really don't have large canopies.
Okay. Can you give us a little history on the site? Who donated or purchased? What are the covenants, etc.?
I'm not the person to ask, but as far as I know, I'm just the engineer. As far as I know, it was a property that was going to be developed, and at some point it was acquired by the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast. I don't know if they bought it or if it was given to them. I really couldn't answer that question. I just know that was the history. It was cattle for a while, and it was a proposed development.
Okay. Here's a technical question. What is the case number given from the county, the SEZ? I don't understand that question.
Helen, I think I can answer that. Veronica posted in the chat. They
Okay.
haven't officially submitted the zoning application yet, so I don't think there's going to be a number. And she says they've been working with Dirk Danley at Lee County.
Stanley? It's a Stanley? Somebody named Stanley?
Dirk Danley.
Oh, Danley. Okay. Mhm.
So Deborah, I think that answers your question, but if it doesn't, feel free to chime in again. And while I'm here, somebody's asking what the facility's maximum capacity is. And my question is, do you know if they're envisioning hosting events at this place? Like
I don't have that answer. I'm just the design engineer. So.
Sure. Okay.
So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Okay,
Veronica, if you were supposed to present, I'm so sorry you're unable to get audio, but you can use the chat. Yeah. And so I encourage you to answer questions in the chat, which she just has done. Special events would require a special event permit, she says. Well, of course, but I guess maybe the question is, are there plans to have special events? I did notice on the website of the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast that they hope to bring back Mango Mania, which generally has many hundreds, if not thousands of cars because it's so popular. It's been held at the German American Club off the island for a few years. Okay, she says, not that I'm aware of, I can find out from the applicant. Okay, here's another question. Is the Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast a for-profit company that manages the land for the quote owner? That's an interesting question. Do either of you know the answer to that, Tom, or?
I do not. I don't know the absolute answer to that. I believe they're not for profit, but I'm not sure.
Yes.
The Conservation Foundation is a nonprofit organization.
Okay,
do you know, Veronica, that's an answer from Veronica. Veronica, do they own the property or are they managing it? I believe they own it, but could you verify that?
Okay. Will you be hosting weddings? You probably don't know this, but weddings, Feast Upon the Fields. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like a big party. Uh, Nobody knows the answer to that question. All right.
I don't, Helen, but I can tell you that they do own the property.
Who owns the property?
The
Conservation Fund?
Conservation Foundation of the
Okay,
Gulf Coast.
they own
Yes,
the
ma'am.
property. Okay, that's helpful. What if the owner backs out after the site is developed? Is that a question that you can answer? Or that Veronica can answer?
I can probably put a little more to that. It sounds like if
Mhm.
Conservation Gulf owns it, then that kind of answers the other question. It's going to remain in preserve as long as you guys are intact as a entity. Question.
These presenters are not from the Conservation Foundation. They're the engineering consultants, right? Being used by
I
the
am, yes.
foundation. What are the, here's another question in the chat. What are the plans for this site in 5 to 10 years? Is the stormwater pond designed to hold water from future buildings? And that was Judy Ott. Maybe Judy, you want to elaborate on that? I don't quite understand that question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. So my question really does relate to what percentage of this vegetated parcel you plan on putting impervious surface on, because that looks like a really large stormwater pond. And looks like it perhaps is designed to hold a larger parking lot and larger buildings in the future. And I'm curious if the future design for the parcel includes additional paved areas and parking areas in order to generate that volume that stormwater pond is designed to hold. And that was why I asked the question about, have you considered using shell drives and impervious surface? And I really don't understand why you need 48 parking spots if nobody's gonna use the launch.
Well, I can't remember exactly what the calculation, it wasn't something that we just came up with it at random. And the stormwater pond is you have to design ponds for the seasonal high water level, which is almost at the surface. And so area for stormwater pond, if you look at Galt Preserve, all those stormwater areas, put them all together, it's not that if you dig a pond, it doesn't, the depth of the pond is not, doesn't really count, because the water is going to start, when you start doing your stormwater model, it starts very close to the surface. So you have a very thin pancake, but you have to stretch way out to take that water in. And some of the depths that you see, again, it's not just a classic stormwater pond. It's a pond that's also going to create habitat for wading birds by having these smaller areas that isolate the prey in. Again, if you've been out to Galt Preserve, it's the same thing. When things start to dry up, you really see a lot of wading birds, because now they have a smaller area and the prey gets concentrated in it, and they start to feed in there. And as far as I know, there are no other plans. The stormwater ponds are built as small as this area can take, the roadways and the parking lot.
I see a message from Veronica that zoning district will require special exemptions for this permitting for the impervious surfaces. Can you go into a little bit more detail about why the special exemptions are needed? Does that mean what part of the zoning does it need to be exempted from in order to allow the project to go forward?
That's probably a question for Veronica because it's a zoning type of question.
Yeah. It's really too bad, since this is a public hearing, that we can't
Really?
get answers to the questions about zoning, because that's really what the question is here, is do they get,
I'm going to time, this is Robert Ballard from the Clusal Land Trust, and I'm going to chime into Judy's question
good, thank you.
because this zoning issue is the same one that we've run into time and time again with the county. Anytime we want to do anything, i.e. Fritz Park, where we wanted to put a pole barn in on a agricultural lot that we have that's permitted for pole barns. But since we don't have agricultural use, they want us to rezone the whole part because it's not agricultural use. They do the same thing with their 2020 people, even though they're county owned properties, they make them rezone their lots and stuff to make it permitted uses, so to speak. We had to do the same thing for St. Jude Harbor to put in a bridge across a wetlands and tiki huts. So this is nothing unusual for the county to make people rezone properties to make it as they consider permitted uses. So this is nothing unusual for the county to make people rezone their properties to conform to what they consider their zoning uses.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And maybe you can answer some of these other questions. I wonder, Robert, if you know anything about the mangroves. My understanding is that you can't cut mangroves down to 2 feet and put a boardwalk over them, according to the Pine Island plan. But I would like your take on that.
Again, you can with permits, you can do that. If you have mangroves across from your house, you can cut them down a percentage and then a percentage again down to a certain height. But if for us putting access through there may be a special exception. You can't quote me on it. I don't know. With special permitting, you could probably do that, and that's probably what they've done. Sounds like they have got special permitting to put a boardwalk through the mangroves for access to Mount Lachey Pass.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on that, Helen.
Yeah. Go ahead.
This is Noel speaking. The Pine Island plan is the only plan out of the 22 planning communities in Lee County that has a special mangrove section, and no mangroves can be disturbed to create any new type of development on Pine Island. And for like an individual dock where you're going a short distance, yes, you can trim the mangroves to a certain height and build your boardwalk over the top of the mangroves to access the water. But in this particular instance, we're talking about, I haven't heard here yet this evening, how many feet of mangrove, because in that particular area, if you look at the aerial, we're talking about a quarter to a half a mile of boardwalk. And that is going to be a substantial impact on the mangroves. And so a part of this special exception that they're going to be seeking in the zoning. But yes, whenever you intend to use a piece of property other than what it's zoned for, you have to rezone the property. And if you have a residential property and you want to build a horse barn on it, you're going to have to rezone the property because that's not a permitted use in residential zoning. And the use that's being proposed here is not a permitted use under the current zoning. That's the benefit of that is it gives the public an opportunity to come to the hearing and make all of their voices heard. So this is a good thing that we're going to have a rezoning hearing.
Well, to answer that question, it's about 0.3 acres
Okay.
of mangroves. I think it's about 600 feet.
Well, I know that we ran into this problem on the Publix development at the center, and they had to reconfigure their whole development because of this mangrove exception for Pine Island Community Plan. So I don't know that that would be an issue in this particular instance, but I know that you mentioned earlier, Tom, that you were going to be buying some mitigation credits from Little Pine Island Bank to offset the impacts that you were going to have there. Now, have there been any additional?
I believe they've already
bought them?
I think they've already bought them. At least they put down the deposit.
Right, that's
for
right.
them.
What you do.
Had to modify.
Right, you put the deposit and then you pay for the rest once the approval is granted. Now, is this site being used for
Correct.
mitigation on any other development sites on Pine Island?
No,
Have
sir.
there been some?
Has generated its own.
Have there been some agreements made by the previous owner of this property to allow for additional development elsewhere on the island and allow an environmental offset on portions of this property? Has there been a set aside?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure not. I also wanted to say that we did have to redesign the pathway for the boardwalk to minimize the mangrove impacts as much as possible through an iterative process with the agencies during the permitting phase of the project. And there was some, this right here was it's a freshwater marsh. It was an isolated freshwater marsh, but then it had a ditch that was dug out from it to the salt flats. So what we did, this has already been done, put in a small weir that is basically blocks the flow coming out as a ditch and has restored the hydrology inside of here. That was done for the water management district concern about some of the impacts.
Well, one of the things that I noticed in your presentation was you had designed a very large parking lot, and in response to that parking lot, when the access road approached Stringfellow Road, you bifurcated the access itself to allow for traffic flow to go north and traffic flow to go south. Well, that tells me that you're anticipating a large number of cars there at one time.
That may or may not happen. It's a I think it was called for special events or something. It's
I
not
think we're concerned about that, and that's something that we would like to know more about, is the kind of and what the possibilities are on downsizing the parking lot. We need to right size the parking lot for what you're telling us you want to use the site for.
Yeah, so I guess what I can offer is that there's a formula from Lee County that about how many parking spaces you need. It's been several years for me. What is it? Almost 5 years or so. I can't remember the exact number, but it's not a figure that I just came up with. It's something I had to calculate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right. So in the chat, there's the question, whoops. Will there be coliform testing at the boat launch? We have trouble getting testing done in Pine Island waters. The Florida Department of Health is having,
I think, Helen, we might end up having to ask the Conservation Foundation to join us at a future meeting, because I feel like we're putting the engineers on the spot and they're talking about technical things and not how the site's going to be run or managed.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you this, that we are going to have turbidity monitoring locations during and after construction until everything is proven to be there's no turbidity being generated.
Right. Yeah, this is a little different issue, coliform bacteria. Someone has asked, I don't know if anyone can answer this question, but if this project were not to go forward for some reason, what would be the plan for use of the land in the future? No one has a clue. Maybe that's pretty hard to predict.
Yeah, again, I think the Conservation Foundation should have sent a representative, and perhaps we can ask them to come to a future meeting.
I agree with Nadine. There are many unanswered questions.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
agree
on its
too.
face, I'm inclined to support the project, but again, my neighbors have a lot of good questions that I'd like to see answered before making that decision.
I agree. I agree with that. I think Tom's done an excellent job of presenting the engineering and the site plan. But I think our concerns are broader than that.
Yeah.
I agree. Can I make a request for future drawings, please?
For,
Can you, for future drawings and discussions about the lengths of the boardwalks to the mangroves, is it possible to show the mean high water line, the mean high tide line on these maps? Because that's the demarcation between the state-owned mangroves that are part of the Mount Lachey Pass Aquatic Reserve and what might be part of the property that's owned by Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast. Thank you.
That's a very interesting idea and question. I guess the question in my mind is, if so few kayakers are actually going to be using this preserve because of the length of the boardwalk, why put the boardwalk back there at all? It seems like a large project and effects on the mangroves, but for very little actual use, except of course for walkers who want to see at these observation points.
Well, what I was trying to say is that, again, I'm not, that's not my expertise, but I think there'll be a lot fewer people wanting to pull their kayak all the way down to the end to launch it. But there might be more people that would want to pull up from the kayak and walk down into the paths, or, you know, the traffic coming from the water to the park amenities rather than the other way around. Just pure speculation, but
yeah, but it's right now, I mean, there are very few kayakers back there, but at any rate, maybe Tom, if you could stop sharing the screen here so I could see everybody and make sure everyone has their questions answered, or if anybody has anything more, or if I missed anything in the chat. Claudia, go ahead, unmute yourself, please, unmute. Yeah.
I really think we need to reschedule because there are just so many questions that we don't have. I'm really concerned about possible events and that large parking lot and places for buses to unload people.
Thank you, Claudia. Other questions or comments? Okay.
Let me, I just want to clear up one thing, because when I talked to you earlier, Helen,
yeah,
a lot of rumors were flying around that the Clusa Land Trust was managing this property and stuff. And I want to make clear for the people, at least people on this call, that the Clusa Land Trust is not managing this property and does not have any financial ties to this property. We have a working relationship with this group as far as working with them to plant seedling pines on this the pasture property there. But other than that, we have no ties to this property whatsoever outside of a working relationship with them. So when people start talking about Clusa Land Trust managing this property, we have no ties to this property whatsoever.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Anything else? All right. Well, you know,
thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Veronica, and very sorry not to hear more from you, Veronica. Yeah, you can feel free to log off or stay with us for a few minutes, but I think what we're going to do is not hold a vote right now,
Right.
because it sounds like the majority of people really want to get more information, and I hope that we can schedule a presentation by people who really can answer all of these kinds of questions. Is there any discussion of what we should do next? Any advice to the GPICA board as to how we should proceed with this?
Well, I think we need to monitor the application process. We need to make sure that when the hearing is scheduled, that we go and we have to make sure we go to the hearing, because if we don't, then we will not be able to participate at the county commission voting meeting. So we have to go and we have to be a member of record to the hearing in order to speak later. So I think it's very important for us to monitor the date and make sure that we have a good showing, and then we prepare ourselves with the questions that we want to have answers to that we had here this evening. If those questions aren't answered between now and the time of the hearing, then we have to go to the hearing to make sure that the hearing examiner has those questions answered.
Noel, don't we also have an informational meeting as a result of the rezoning of the special exceptions?
Well, we will right now, the next meeting is going to be when they schedule their hearing. This is their required meeting they're having tonight.
This is the informational meeting?
This is the required informational meeting.
Would it be appropriate to send a quick note to whoever that we've met with the company representatives and that they were unable to answer a lot of questions? We would like questions answered before they have the meeting.
The board should draft a letter to that effect and send it to the head of the Department of Community Development.
Okay.
Is there a written
And
proposal?
his name is Dave Loveland.
Okay, Noel, we'll be in contact with you from the board to get these details. Thank you.
Yeah.
Veronica Martin has just put up something on the chat saying she will speak to the foundation and see if we can schedule another meeting. I will definitely participate one way or another. Thank you, Veronica. Sue Dahoud, you had a comment or question.
Yeah, I just want to know, there is a written proposal, correct?
Proposal, what do you mean by proposal?
Well, this is
application.
an entity that has
Yes.
boundaries and drawings. Is that document held by the the Civic Association?
No, we don't have any of their documents. This is the first, we're hearing about it for the first time, just as you all are.
Can we request their proposal?
I think we would have to go through Dirk, through the county, because there's no numbers attached to it. So therefore, there's nothing for us to even pull from the county to even look at it.
Right,
That's
they
correct.
have not presented it to the county yet, they said, Veronica said in an earlier chat. So, yeah, that's
Well,
not where they
whatever.
are.
Well, they had, drawings, so they had a construction proposal.
Yeah, once they have a completed application to the county and the county deems the application sufficient, then we will get a link and we can go on the county website and view the complete package. But now
Okay,
it's
here,
not
yeah.
available.
Here, Veronica says, we're in the process of preparing our application. It's not finalized yet. This was just a public informational meeting. Once I submit, it will become public record, but I would be more than happy to send Dr. Fox, that's me, a copy of the applications.
Good, good.
Thank you very much. We would love to have those ASAP.
And I just missed it. What is the entity that's requesting this?
Okay, it's called,
Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast.
and they have a website.
If you look up earlier in the chat, I posted a link to their website. And I also posted a link to the Pine Island project specific information they have.
They have quite a bit of information about.
Yeah,
They
unfortunately, I
plan-
logged off and back on, so I can't see it.
Okay.
Here,
Can you put it on the GPCI?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you put it on that
if you
website?
look,
I have a
if
hard
you
time.
look in our May meeting agenda on gpica.org, the links are in
It's in
there.
there? Okay, that's
Okay,
fine.
good.
I'll just look it up.
Great, thank you.
Are the drawings that he showed us this evening, are those available on our website?
The only one I've got posted currently on our website is just the map showing where the project is. It's just the basic outline. It was in the email that we sent out to members earlier this week, and it's on our website. Once Veronica has a chance to send the information, I'll put the updated documents online.
Yeah, we'll get it up there as soon as we get it. Yeah.
And just as a reminder, we don't have any say in this. This is all information, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't have any formal say. We can't block it, but we can have influence, just like anything else
Okay.
we do, Sue.
And there will be there'll be a county commissioner meeting, or is this a zoning meeting we're talking about
The
attending?
Well,
zoning.
it has to go
Hearing
through a
meeting.
hearing examiner first, right, Noel?
That's
Yes.
correct.
And then that's where, if we want to speak before the county commission, we have to be heard at the hearing examiner first. So it's at least a minimum of 2 meetings if you want your voice to be heard. You have to speak at that first one.
And Nadine, when you say we have to speak, it's as individuals.
We as the individuals, I mean, depending on what happens and if the board makes if the members vote on a decision, we support it, we don't support it, you know, we can appoint a representative from the Civic Association and speak on people's behalf as well.
That's correct.
We should make sure we know what that timeline is. Sometimes things sneak in that we don't expect.
I'm on their mailing list, and so
Okay.
I send everything
Noel
to
will be
Ellen.
on it, yeah. Noel will be on it.
Okay, good.
Okay, we're all set then. Well, would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn our meeting?
So moved.
Oop. I second.
All right, thank you for motion second.
Quick.
Anybody opposed? Let's do it that way. Nobody is opposed. All right, thank you all for coming. We learned something tonight, even though we didn't learn what we expected we would. So hope to see you next month, if not before. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
Good
Thanks,
job,
Ellen.
Ellen.
Good job. Good job,
Bye.
everybody.
Hi,
Thank
Judy.
you, Helen.
You're welcome.